This video is sponsored in part by LinerX.
Good day, folks, and welcome to Ed's Garage at Bannister Hyundai. Today I want to do a quick side-by-side comparison of the 2023 Hyundai Ioniq 5 and the 2023 Hyundai Ioniq 6. Now, this is my personal Ioniq 6, so if you're wondering which one I like better, I actually like them almost equally. There's a couple of reasons I picked the Ioniq 6 over the 5 though, and I'll try to get to that in the video. Also keep in mind this Ioniq 6 is going to look a little bit different from factory. They don't actually come with the orange pinstriping, and the Nocturne Gray doesn't come with the black rocker panel, and they don't come with rear tinted windows. So just keep that in mind. It's not 100% factory. But anyway, let's start the side-by-side comparison. Now this one here is a luxury trim, so it's not the very top trim. In Canada, there's a ultimate trim that comes with a big, huge glass roof that does not open. This one is the ultimate though, and it does come with a sunroof, glass roof kind of thing. I'll show you in a moment. But in any case, luxury versus ultimate, but basically the same as an ultimate with the exception of that sunroof. So it's a valid comparison. All right, starting with the overall size of these vehicles. Well, the Ioniq 5 sits a little bit taller, as you can tell, but the Ioniq 6 is a little bit longer. Strangely enough, the Ioniq 6 actually has a shorter wheelbase. However, the whole vehicle is about 8 inches longer, and that's just because of the overhangs on the front and rear of the vehicle. You'll notice that the rear of the vehicle sticks out quite far from the rear wheel compared to the Ioniq 5. And that's where most of that extra length comes from. So standing as close as I can to the Ioniq 6 here, and you can see what the height of this vehicle is. It basically comes up to my armpit, and the back of the vehicle slopes off quite a bit, especially when compared to the Ioniq 5. The Ioniq 5, if I stand beside this one is more like shoulder height. So I would say probably a good 2 or 3 inches taller. I'm sure it's easy enough to look that up. But the roof line is very straight, so there's definitely going to be better headroom in the back of the Ioniq 5. Headroom in the Ioniq 5 and 6 on the front seats isn't going to be too much different. As for the width of the two vehicles, the Ioniq 6 definitely looks wider, however it really isn't. They're basically the same width. Keep in mind that these vehicles do both ride on the same EGMP platform, and they both have the same 77.4 kilowatt hour battery. In some markets you can get a smaller battery in both of these vehicles, but in Canada it's just the 77.4 kilowatt hour battery. Range, of course, is going to be significantly better on the Ioniq 6 just because it's much more aerodynamically efficient, with a drag coefficient of between 0.21 and 0.24 depending on where you are in the world, what type of mirrors you have, what type of wheels you have, that sort of thing. The drag coefficient on the Ioniq 5, if memory serves, is 0.28, so it is, of course, it's a boxier vehicle, and the drag coefficient isn't as good as the Ioniq 6. All right, having a look at the exterior styling, they're both very attractive vehicles. They've both actually won, for the years that they came out, they both won World Car of the Year, World EV of the Year, and World Design Award of the Year. So both of them hold those three titles for 2022 and for 2023. So pretty cool that they both won that back to back. But yeah, as far as exterior styling goes, we have these really cool squared off headlights on the Ioniq 5, and on the Ioniq 6, they're more typical design headlights. However, they are still pretty cool with those little pixels in there. Nice orange pixels on the front here for the daytime running lights, and for the Ioniq 5, you get these white sort of rectangular things. Keep in mind any distortion you see or waviness in the lights just is due to the LED refresh and the camera refresh rate. As far as features go, on the front, fairly similar as well. You have the active air ducts on the front here that open when it's cooling the battery. Same on the Ioniq 5. One thing to note on the Ioniq 5, you get these really cool sort of lights right here. These actually light up, these little lines light up at night, and it mimics that on the back as well. On the front of the Ioniq 6, there's nothing like that. It's just the headlights in the front. They both do have the forward-facing cameras, of course, for autonomous emergency braking system, as well as the 360 camera system. And they both have forward parking sensors. They both have smart park. They're very close in feature packages. So what I'll do is maybe I'll refer you to my videos on both of these vehicles to give you an idea exactly what features they come with. Check that out in the links in the description below. But I'll try to mention what's different about them in any event. Speaking of which, the Hyundai badge on the Ioniq 5 does stick out, and on the Ioniq 6 it's flush, so maybe a little better aerodynamic efficiency there. Very, very minor, of course. As far as the windshield accoutrements go, they both have, of course, the same stuff in the top of the windshield, the forward-facing camera, as well as the rain sensor. But there is one big difference here. Let's have a quick look at the head-up display here. You can see it's quite large on the Ioniq 5. That's because the Ioniq 5 has something called augmented reality head-up display, whereas the Ioniq 6 does not. It's just a standard head-up display, nothing too special about it. Well, there's a lot special about it, but comparatively speaking, the Ioniq 5's head-up display is definitely better. As for tires and wheels, one thing I really like about the Ioniq 5 is that it has these really cool little design elements going in the wheel wells. It's kind of nice. I'm not a big fan of the aluminum alloy rims on the Ioniq 5. However, they're not bad. They look pretty good. It's wrapped by Michelin 255 45 20-inch tires, and the Ioniq 6, on the other hand, really love these wheels. I actually prefer these immensely over the Ioniq 5s. They're not quite as aerodynamically efficient, but interestingly enough, they're wrapped by P0 tires from Pirelli, and these are a 245 40 R20, so definitely a more low rolling resistance tire on the Ioniq 5, which probably is why it handles a little tiny bit better as well. Handling between these two vehicles, fairly close, but the Ioniq 5 being a little bit taller, a little bit more top heavy, and a little bit softer tires in the front and rear, handling is not going to be quite as good, but it's pretty close. As for styling down the side, the Ioniq 5 mirrors have these cool little pixel running light or turn signal lights in the mirrors. The Ioniq 6 has something like that, but it's a little bit of a different shape. You can see the camera bump underneath both of the mirrors, and they both, of course, are power folding mirrors. You also get power folding door handles on both. They're pretty much exactly the same. There is a cut line that's kind of cool. You get this kind of a Z-shaped cut line in the Ioniq 5 that you don't get in the Ioniq 6. The Ioniq 6 is more traditional, kind of smooth styling, but I think they both look really good. They also both have their charging doors on the rear right side of the vehicle. With the Ioniq 5, there is one cap covering the DC port, no cap covering the J1772 port, and there's two buttons in here. One to basically put a hold on your charging. So basically you can enable timed charging. You can also press this button to close the door, and of course it has the 4 pixels in there to indicate what the charging level is currently at. On the Ioniq 5, on the other hand, come around and have a look at this one. This one actually flips upwards, and inside here, again, you have the removable cover for the DC fast charging port. I will say the Ioniq 6 is much easier to pull off. This can sometimes be a little bit of annoying to grab. And you have way more pixels in here. So basically, these 4 lines are the same as the 4 pixels on the Ioniq 6. And then, of course, there is the single button here to close that. So no quick access to timed charging in here like there is on the Ioniq 6 for whatever reason. All right, having a look at the rear styling of both vehicles. And here's where there's quite a big departure. Now, obviously, the rear styling on a sedan is not going to be anything like the Ioniq 5 with its SUV design. But one big difference. This is a trunk, and this is a tailgate. So with the Ioniq 6, they decided not to go with a hatchback design, whereas the Ioniq 5, considering it's a SUV, which kind of looks like a hatchback, obviously it has a much bigger opening. So the Ioniq 5 definitely wins if you're going to be packing a lot of stuff in it. The Ioniq 6, you know, about 11 cubic feet of space in the back here. It's not too bad. Guys, this is not sponsored by Saab by any means. This is just an old mat that I had from an old car that I had. You both get 60/40 split rear bench on both vehicles, and you can, of course, close the tailgate from the inside here simply by pressing this button. One thing that is different, though, you have a little lock button here. You can actually lock all the doors from there. On the Ioniq 5, you cannot, so there's just the button to close the hatch in there. Furthermore, with the rear styling, you have the huge light bar going all the way across on the Ioniq 6. Again, don't mind the flickering. That's not actually happening in real life. You also have the Ioniq 6 badging here that's kind of subset behind sort of a see-through plastic. It looks quite sharp. And you got these 2 fins here. This, of course, is your third brake light, and it all lights up when you hit the brakes. Pretty cool. On the Ioniq 5, on the other hand, There's no lights going all the way across, but of course it is all pixels, and these are, I believe they're just reflectors. You also have the backup lights right here, and the Ioniq 6 badge kind of sticks out on top of that. Sorry, Ioniq 5 badge sticks out on top of that. And again, no flush badge for the Hyundai logo, and no rear wiper on either vehicle. However, it makes more of an annoyance on the Ioniq 5 because this window does get quite dirty, whereas in the Ioniq 6, because it's a sedan, it's very streamlined, doesn't really have a problem with that. Future iterations of the Ioniq 5 will, however, have window wipers, so that's helpful. Down on the bottom of the bumper, you have the reflectors here on either side of the Ioniq 5, and similarly, you have reflectors right here on the Ioniq 6. There is your backup light right there. And now we'll move on to the interior of the vehicle. So we're going to have a quick look at the back seat first. Now, the back seat on both vehicles is very, very roomy. Now, you'll notice this one actually has reclining rear seats, which is kind of nice. That's something you don't get on the Ioniq 6. And there is a ton of room in here. This seat right now is pushed quite far back, but I still have room. I've got a nice flat floor, almost completely flat. There's a little bit of a bump here because this actually is capable of sliding forwards and backwards, but almost completely flat. We close the door here. It's a nice, quiet cabin. Very, very well appointed. Nice leather material on this particular trim level as well. You'll notice both of the seat backs are solid. There's pockets back here. We've got vents over here that we can control as well, which of course is tied into the dual zone climate control. Got a couple of USB ports down here, just USB-A. A little bit of storage space in there as well. And if I sit straight up, which I can do in this vehicle, we have maybe 1.5 inches of headroom. Now, of course, nobody sits like this. This is incredibly uncomfortable, so I'm going to lean it back to a comfortable position. And now we have about 2.5 inches of space above my head. The Ioniq 5 also comes with rear retracting sunshades, which is nice. And then, of course, rear heated seats as well, you'll find on both vehicles. The door handle itself, one of my small complaints is that during the day, a lot of people will get in and they won't actually see that this is a handle because it kind of blends in with the background. So they do this, they kind of grab this, of course, which you don't want to do, right? Down here, you've got a bottle holder and a little bit of storage and, of course, the speaker. All right, now let's check out the Ioniq 6 and see what sort of differences we can find in there. All right, stepping into the Ioniq 6. Now, one thing I didn't point out was that the Ioniq 5 did have a cup holder armrest very similar to this. All right, and if I sit straight up, I can touch the roof with my head. So there is no space between my head and the roof if I sit straight up. But of course, you can't sit straight up because this is a sedan and I can't move the seat forward. It's just fixed, it doesn't move. So with the seat back, I still have about maybe 1 inch, maybe 3/4 of an inch above my head. So definitely more headroom in the Ioniq 5 to the tune of about 1.5 inches of extra space. Now, here's where it gets a little bit different though. Again, we still have the solid seat backs, but the vents are here. So instead of having them on the B pillars, they're in the center, again connected to the front dual zone system. We have USB-C ports, which is a nice upgrade, and a little bit of storage space right down there. By the way, loving these Liner X mats. So this video is partially sponsored by Liner X. Keep that in mind the next time you're looking for all-weather mats for your vehicle. You'll also notice that the floor in the Ioniq 6 in the back is completely flat. There's no hump in the middle at all. On the door, however, we do not have the retractable sunshade, unfortunately, but we do have a dual color interior. So even if you were to get the black one, black interior, this is still 2 different colors, which is nice. Still heated seats. Still, there is a new place here to add, to put your cell phone, for instance, like that wasn't there on the Ioniq 5. Same sort of cup holder, bottle holder down here, a little bit of storage. So I actually find between the two, to be completely frank, aside from the fact that these seats don't recline, I think this is actually the more comfortable back seat. I don't know why that is exactly, but when I'm sitting here, it just feels better to me. So your experience may change or may vary from mine, but I don't know. I just like it better back here. I don't know. But maybe that's because I own the car. All right, let's check out the frunks and then we'll check out the front seats. All right, to access the frunk on both vehicles, you open up the hood there. And then you come around to the front of the vehicle, move the latch, and lift the lid. So the front in both of these vehicles is quite small. There's not a whole heck of a lot of room in here, but I want to point out one thing you're going to notice with the other one. So let me open up the other one real quick. All right, you can see the difference already. So on this one, there's another step. You need to open up the front lid. And the thing that I don't like about that is that if you accidentally leave this open and then close the hood, it's going to damage something. But in any case, there's a tiny bit more space in the Ioniq 5 front than there is in the Ioniq 6. It's a pretty negligible difference, but yeah, a little tiny bit more space in that one. But yeah, as you can see, this is actually sealed up against the hood. So kind of a better design, I find anyway, aside from the fact that it's a bit smaller. While we're looking at under the hood, I want to point out one thing that's rather interesting. So the Ioniq 6 actually has a shared coolant for the battery and electric motor, whereas the Ioniq 5 does not. It actually has a separate coolant system for the battery and for the electric motor. I'm not sure which is which, to be honest, but I did find that a little bit interesting. So if anyone knows why that is, please leave a comment below. But they are the same platform, same battery, and as a matter of fact, even the same motors, yet they've actually segmented the cooling system. I think this might be the better design, to be honest, but who knows. The other thing I'm noticing is that the hood for the Ioniq 5 actually comes right out to the outside of the vehicle, whereas in the Ioniq 6, it sits within the fender. So on the 5, it's part of the fender. On the 6, it's within the fender. Whether or not that's one way is better or the other, I'll leave that up to you guys. I think the fact that it actually extends out is pretty cool on the Ioniq 5. I'm not sure how that would look on the 6 though, but you know, they both look good, so who cares? All right, so while both of the passenger seats are the same, the driver seats unfortunately are not. The driver's seat on the Ioniq 5 is the better seat of the two vehicles, and that's because it has the retractable calf support. And unfortunately, that is not on the Ioniq 6. It also has this little button here, which is for the relaxation mode. So basically, you can use this button here to put the seat kind of into a, well, they call it relaxation mode. So it'll actually lean this all the way back, and it'll put the calf support up completely. It'll also tilt the seat as well if you want to take a nap or whatever while you're charging. The Ioniq 6, unfortunately, does not have that. Another thing the Ioniq 6 does not have is the sliding center console. So with this little handle under here, you can actually grab the whole console and you can move it back and forth. Not entirely sure what the point of that is, because when it's all the way back, I mean, you eliminate the comfort for the center passenger in the rear. And the armrest is long enough that it kind of works wherever this is. So it's interesting, but I find it kind of gimmicky. I don't really see much point to it, to be honest. On the 6, the seat, again, doesn't have those extra 2 buttons, and the center console is fixed. The only downside is you can't play footsies with your wife while driving, or husband, and there is some storage space underneath the console here. And you'll also notice that all of the buttons for the windows, for the door locks, they're all in the center console here. And there's nothing on the driver's or passenger's door. It's completely clean. No buttons here at all, other than the 2 for the memory seating and mirror system. Also, look at the gigantic Bose speaker grill here, and this cool little sort of translucent pocket that you can kind of stick stuff and see from the outside, which is interesting. Back to the Ioniq 5 now, of course, and you have a pretty handsome door panel here, very structurally complicated. A lot going on here. You've got all these pixels along the side. You got the buttons there for the memory seating and mirrors, and of course you have all your mirror controls and window controls on the door panel. So as far as comfort wise, they both have padded armrests, but again, this does kind of blend in with that. So new passengers to this vehicle, pardon me, will sometimes miss the fact that there's an armrest here. And a much smaller Bose speaker grill here, but the same Bose speaker. I don't think there's any difference with the actual speakers themselves, just a different looking grill. All right, when you jump into either the Ioniq 5 or Ioniq 6, you're greeted by this massive panel behind the steering wheel for your dual 12-inch screens. Check that out. So very nice infotainment system and instrument cluster. 12-inch screens, 2 of them, and they look really good. They're quite high resolution, easy to read, easy to understand, but there is one major difference. On the Ioniq 5, the panel is white, and on the Ioniq 6, the panel is black. It's also surrounded by this cool sort of silver accent. Now the screens on mine right now are in night mode, so in case you're wondering why the actual background of the screen is different, both vehicles can do that. This one is just currently on night mode, whereas the Ioniq 5 is on day mode. All right, before we get into some of the feature differences, I wanted to show you, well, I want to show you a feature difference. So both vehicles come equipped in the top trim with a sunroof. However, the Ioniq 5 is a big panoramic sunroof that doesn't open. The Ioniq 6, on the other hand, is a small sunroof that does open. So the fact that it opens is definitely a win for the Ioniq 6. However, the fact that the one in the Ioniq 5 is gigantic is a win for the Ioniq 5. I guess it kind of depends on what it is you're looking for. Personally, I like to be able to open that up and wave to people. Yes, that's what I do. All right, one little difference here. For the infotainment system USB port, it's actually right up here on the Ioniq 6, right next to the wireless charging pad. I prefer this location quite a bit, and I'll show you why in the Ioniq 5. All right, so in the Ioniq 5, the actual location for the wireless charger is fairly easy to get to. It's way down here. It is kind of tucked underneath though, so easy enough to get to, but yeah, kind of way down there. But check this out. So the port for the Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, and any other sort of connectivity to the screen is definitely in a weird spot. I'm just going to turn this fan down here. Sorry. There we go. So it's way down here. Now, just to give you an idea of how far I need to stretch to get that, I'm going to try to do this. So currently I'm sitting where I would normally drive the vehicle, and really need to actually stretch quite a bit to get there. You can see I'm right off the seat to get to that port. So ultimately, I mean, you're going to leave a cable in the vehicle, and you can have it routed up through the instrument or through the center console. Unfortunately, there's no hole in the back of the instrument console, or center console here rather, to pass a cord through. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly why they decided to do that. I guess they expect you to kind of leave your phone in here, but there isn't really a nice clean spot for it. So because this vehicle isn't equipped with wireless CarPlay, wireless Android Auto, you're going to have to drop your phone into that little tiny cubby hole. Otherwise, you're constantly going to have a cable running to the center console. Kind of a miss on the design, I find, and it's too bad, but that's definitely a win for the Ioniq 6. While we're on the subject of wins for the Ioniq 6, let's have a quick look at the steering wheels. So this, of course, we are now in the Ioniq 5. You can tell by the white panel around the screen. On the steering wheel, you'll notice we have the 4 pixels for the letter H. Of course, that is H in Morse code. We have our stereo controls on the left side and our drive controls on the right side, including adaptive cruise control, lane departure, lane keep assistance, and of course our drive mode button. By the way, drive mode buttons are pretty much identical. The only difference is there's no custom mode in the Ioniq 5 like there is in the Ioniq 6. At least not that I'm aware of. Yeah, I just verified that in the vehicle settings under drive mode, there is no custom mode setting. So basically you have snow mode if you hold the drive button down, and then you have eco, normal, and sport. But you'll notice actually the screen almost looks identical to the Ioniq 6, which we'll jump in next. All right, so currently looking at the Ioniq 6 again. So first I'll touch on the steering wheel real quick. So the win here is you actually have LEDs in these pixels now, and they do denote some things. So when you're charging, they'll actually give you your charge level. Again, don't mind the flashing. It's not actually doing that in real life. Also, when I change drive modes, it actually does a little cool light show for me as you put it in the different modes. If I hold the drive mode button, currently it puts it into snow mode, but let me show you, we can actually change it right here to custom mode if I wanted to. So let me do that again, because I don't think I got it quick enough. So if I hold that button, then I can choose custom. So now we're in sort of custom mode, and let me show you the settings for that real quick. So under settings, vehicle, drive mode, custom. So I can go in here and I can change my drive mode. I can actually change the settings of it. I can put power output to maximum, standard, or minimized. Acceleration sensitivity, I can change that, high, moderate, low. Steering, normal or sport. And then driveline, automatic, all-wheel drive, or two-wheel drive. So it gives me a quick, ability to change how I want the vehicle to react under acceleration, that sort of thing, instead of just giving me a snow mode. So that's kind of cool. That's something that unfortunately is not in the Ioniq 5. Also, you'll notice on the steering wheel that now the controls for the drive and audio are on opposite sides. All the audio controls are over here, closer to the infotainment screen, which does make a lot of sense. And all the drive controls now are on the left side here. You can also tell that the steering wheel is a little bit updated based on the actual controls themselves. So instead of just having switches, we now have a little scroll wheel on both sides. So that's kind of nice for volume, and as well as going through different menus on your infotainment or your instrument cluster screen. Going back to the center console for a moment, don't mind my junk, but you'll also notice that we have USB-C ports in the Ioniq 6, whereas on the Ioniq 5, as you can see here, I'll get back down here, it's USB-A still, which is kind of interesting on the 2023 model that they didn't change that to USB-C. Also, there's a little bit less space in the center console storage, well, a lot less space on the Ioniq 5. However, there's a huge compartment down here. It's just not hidden. All right, I just noticed an interesting little omission in the Ioniq 5. There's no button on the inside of the car to open the charging port door. There is on the Ioniq 6. Now, whether or not that's a big deal to you, I don't know, probably not. But it is a little bit of a difference between the two, so I thought I'd mention it anyway. All right, next difference I want to highlight is actually in the settings again for the car. So we're going to go to vehicle settings, which we're in now. I'm going to go to lights, and I'm going to go to ambient light and color. So, like many Hyundais, the Ioniq 5 has a really cool thing where you can actually change up to 64 different options here for colors for the ambient lighting. Now, the ambient lighting comes out in various spots, comes up above the door handle there, as well as in the dash somewhere. I can't remember exactly where it is now. But yeah, you can actually change the ambient lighting color, which is kind of cool. And of course, you can also change the brightness and whatnot. But there's a little bit of a difference here with the Ioniq 6. Let me show you. So we're going to go back to lights, and I'm going to go back to ambient light and color. And this is the difference. So now we actually have two color wheels because we can have an upper color and a lower color. So in the door, for instance, currently I have the upper color set to like an orangey color, and the bottom is set to kind of a purple. Don't judge me on my color choices, but essentially that's what it is. You also have this little light strip along the dash here as well. So a dual zone or a dual color system in the Ioniq 6 that is not in the Ioniq 5, unfortunately. All right, I think I'm going to end the video here. Of course, these vehicles are very, very similar, guys. There's very many features that are exactly the same between the two vehicles and a few that are different. And I think I've highlighted the few that are different. I don't believe I'm missing anything. If I am, please don't hesitate to comment below. I'm probably missing something. We're talking vehicles with, you know, literally like 100 different features that we could talk about. But they're both on the same EGMP platform. You know, they were both designed around the same period of time, so there's going to be more similarities than differences. As far as the major differences, obviously those come in the styling of the vehicle and the size of the vehicle and the shape of the vehicle. But, you know, there isn't any major differences in features and whatnot. As for pricing, interestingly enough, the Ioniq 6 is a little bit less expensive in the United States, but a little bit more expensive in Canada, and it's also only eligible for all the rebates in Canada, well, in British Columbia anyway, if the price is below 55 grand for the one you're buying. So only the base model in British Columbia, Canada is eligible for the $4,000 maximum provincial rebate. So unfortunately that makes this vehicle even more expensive. But yeah, strange that in the United States it's cheaper. That's I'll never understand that. That was a bit of a shock when I you know, finally got pricing for this one. A couple things I wish they would add. I did note in my 10 likes, 10 dislikes video, so please don't hesitate to check that out for the Ioniq 6. I'll link that in the description below as well. I hope you enjoyed this video otherwise, and if you do have any comments, don't hesitate to leave them below. If you like the video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for future videos that are similar to this. But I appreciate you watching, appreciate the time taken. I know this is a bit of a longer video. It wasn't intended to be a longer video, but here we are. Again, thanks so much, and have a wonderful day.